The glass shattered against the stone fireplace, amber whiskey streaming down like blood from a fresh wound. Elias Thornridge didn't flinch. He stood motionless in the center of his study, watching the flames dance behind the broken shards. His jaw set in that particular way his ranch hands had learned meant someone was about to get fired, or worse. But there was no one left to fire. He'd sent them all away an hour ago. Every servant, every stable boy, everyone who might witness what happened when the great Elias Thornridge finally cracked. "You think I'm some prize bull you can parade around?" His voice came out raw, directed at no one. The empty room swallowed his words whole. Outside, Montana's winter wind screamed against the mansion's walls like it wanted in. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked past midnight. Another day survived. Another day of rejections, cold stares, and the performance of being the man everyone thought he was. Elias moved to the window, pressing his forehead against the frozen glass. His reflection stared back. 34 years old, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across his forehead no matter how many times he pushed it back. Women called him handsome. Men called him ruthless. Neither word meant anything anymore. The telegram sat on his desk where he'd left it. He didn't need to read it again. He'd memorized every word. The Vanderbilt girl arrives Thursday. Father insists you reconsider. This alliance would be advantageous for both families. Advantageous, that word again. Like he was a business deal instead of a human being. He grabbed the telegram and fed it to the fire, watching the paper curl and blacken. 43 rejections. The number had become a joke in certain circles, he knew. The man who refused the world. The alpha who needed no one. If they only knew. Elias poured himself another whiskey, straight from the bottle this time since he'd destroyed his last glass. The burn down his throat felt good, real, one of the few things that still did. "Mr. Thornridge?" He spun, whiskey sloshing over his hand. Thomas stood in the doorway, his weathered face cautious. The old ranch foreman was supposed to be gone with the others. "I told everyone to leave." "You did." Thomas stepped inside anyway, closing the door behind him. "Been working for you 12 years now. Figure that earns me the right to ignore orders once in a while." Elias turned back to the window. "Not tonight, especially tonight." Thomas moved closer, boots heavy on the hardwood. "Saw what you did to that Pemberton girl this afternoon, the way you cut her down in front of her whole family. She deserved it. Maybe. Maybe not." Thomas paused. "But that ain't you, boss. I've seen you angry, seen you cold, but never cruel. Not like that." The whiskey bottle felt heavy in Elias's hand. He wanted to throw it too, watch it explode like the glass. Instead, he set it down carefully on the desk. "You know what she said to me?" His voice came out quiet, dangerous. "Before her father brought her here, she told her friends she'd tame the wild Montana beast, like I was some animal that needed breaking. So you broke her first." "I told her the truth, that she didn't want me. She wanted what I represented. The land, the money, the name. And when I asked her to tell me one true thing about who I actually am, she couldn't answer." Thomas sighed, the sound heavy with years of watching the same scene play out in different ways. "They're all the same to you now, aren't they? Every woman who walks through that door. Because they are all the same." Elias turned to face him fully. "You think I don't see it? The calculations behind their smiles? The way their fathers discuss terms before the daughters even arrive? It's commerce, Thomas. Dressed up in silk and perfume, but commerce all the same. Your parents. Don't!" The word came out sharp enough to cut. "Don't talk about them." But Thomas had already started, and the old man was stubborn when he wanted to be. "Your parents loved each other, real love, the kind that doesn't need contracts or arrangements. And look where it got them." Elias's laugh held no humor. "Dead in a carriage accident, leaving me alone at 19 to run an empire I never asked for. You want to know what I learned from their great love story, Thomas? That caring about someone just gives the world leverage against you." The wind rattled the windows, as if punctuating his point. Thomas studied him for a long moment. "That what Elizabeth taught you?" The name hit like a physical blow. Elias's hand tightened on the desk edge, knuckles going white. "Get out." "Boss?" "I said get out." Thomas held his ground for 3 more seconds, then nodded slowly. "You're killing yourself, you know. Maybe not with a bullet or a rope, but you're doing it all the same. This isolation, this anger,
It's eating you from the inside. Then let it eat. Elias turned back to the window. Close the door behind you.
He listened to Thomas's footsteps retreat, heard the door click shut, and only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. His reflection in the window looked older than 34. Tired. The kind of tired sleep never fixed. Elizabeth. He hadn't let himself think that name in months, years maybe. But tonight, with whiskey in his blood and rage in his chest, the memories came anyway. She'd been different. That's what he'd thought. 23 years old and stupid in love, he'd believed she saw him, really saw him. Not just the Thornridge name or the Montana holdings. They'd met at a Denver social, back when he still attended such things. She'd been wearing green, he remembered. The same shade as summer grass. "You look trapped," she'd said, appearing at his elbow while he'd been cornered by a railroad magnate's wife. "I am trapped." "Then let's escape." They'd walked out together, scandalized half the party, and spent the night talking on a hotel balcony while the city sprawled below them. She'd told him about her dreams of seeing Paris. He'd told her about the weight of carrying his father's legacy. She'd understood. Or he'd thought she did. 6 months later, he'd proposed. Simple, private, just the two of them on his land with mountains in the distance. She'd said yes. Then her father had gotten involved. Elias closed his eyes, but the memories played behind his eyelids anyway. The way Elizabeth's father had laid out the terms. Her family's debts were substantial. A marriage to Elias Thornridge would clear them. In exchange, Elias would gain social connections in Denver society, political leverage, access to her father's banking networks. "It's just business," her father had said. "You understand business." He'd understood. He'd understood that Elizabeth had been sent to that Denver social specifically to catch his attention, that their midnight conversation had been rehearsed, that her dreams of Paris had been market research into what might appeal to a young romantic ranch owner. The real blow had come when he'd confronted her, asking if any of it had been real. "Does it matter?" she'd asked, and the fact that it was a genuine question had told him everything. She'd married a Philadelphia Steel heir 3 months later, someone whose debts matched her father's needs more precisely. Elias had received the announcement by telegram. He'd burned that one too. "You're being dramatic," he told his reflection. "It was 15 years ago. Let it go." But his reflection knew better. It wasn't about Elizabeth anymore. It was about what she'd proven, that everyone had a price, everyone played angles, and the only way to win was not to play at all. 43 rejections. Each one a small victory. Each one proof that he controlled his own life, his own choices. That no amount of social pressure or family alliances could force him into becoming what his father had been, a man whose love had made him vulnerable. The clock struck 1. Elias retrieved another glass from the cabinet, poured carefully this time, and settled into the leather chair by the fire. The study felt massive around him. His entire mansion did. 14 bedrooms for one person, a dining table that seated 20, stables for 30 horses. All of it empty, except for him and the staff he paid to pretend he wasn't alone. A knock at the door, softer than Thomas's had been. "I'm not seeing anyone." The door opened anyway. Marie, his housekeeper, peered inside. She was 60, gray-haired, and one of the few people who'd known his parents. "There's someone at the gate, Mr. Thornridge." "At 1 in the morning?" "Yes, sir." "Tell them to come back at a reasonable hour, or better yet, don't come back at all." Marie didn't move. "It's a woman, sir, on horseback, alone." That got his attention. "Alone in this weather? She says she'll wait until morning if she has to. I told her she'd freeze, but she just—" Marie hesitated. She smiled and said she'd survived worse. Elias set down his glass. A woman alone on the Montana frontier in January was either desperate or insane. Possibly both. "What does she want?" "She won't say. Just asked to speak with you personally." "Then she's wasting her time." He reached for his whiskey again. "Send her to the bunkhouse. She can warm up, get some food, sleep in one of the guest rooms, but I'm not seeing her tonight." "I already offered, sir. She refused. Said she'd wait outside until you agreed to see her." "Then she'll be waiting a long time." Marie stepped fully into the room, her expression shifting into something Elias recognized. The look she'd given him when he was 12 and refusing to do his schoolwork. "Mr. Thornridge, I've known you since you were born. I watched your mother teach you that every person deserves basic dignity, no matter their station. Are you really going to let a woman freeze outside your gates because you're too proud to have a conversation? The guilt landed exactly where she'd aimed it. Elias stood, his chair scraping against the floor. Fine. 5 minutes. That's all she gets. Thank you, sir. He followed Marie through the mansion's corridors, their footsteps echoing off walls lined with portraits of Thornridge's past. His grandfather, stern and unyielding. His father, smiling beside his mother in their wedding photo. All these ghosts watching him continue the family line, or fail to. The front door stood 15 feet tall, solid oak with iron fixtures. Elias pulled it open himself, and Montana winter rushed in like it had been waiting for an invitation. The woman sat on her horse just beyond the gate, barely visible in the darkness. Snow had started falling, soft flakes that caught in her hair. She wore practical clothes, trousers, a heavy coat, boots meant for riding. No silk, no ribbons, none of the elaborate dresses the others always wore. You have 5 minutes, Elias called out. State your business. She dismounted with easy grace, leading her horse closer to the gate. The lamplight from the house caught her face, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that studied him with unsettling directness, a mouth that looked like it smiled rarely but meant it when it did. My name is Mara Hale, she said. Her voice carried clearly despite the wind, and I'm not here for business. Everyone who comes here is here for business. I know. That's why I rode 3 days in the snow to tell you I'm not. Elias leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Let me guess. Your father sent you. He's in debt, needs the Thornridge name to clear it. You're the sacrifice. My father's dead. Your brothers, then. Your uncles. Someone with the sense to use you as currency. All dead. She said it matter-of-factly, no emotion, like stating the weather. I have no family left. Then what do you want? Mara studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes seeing something that made his skin prickle with discomfort. You're colder than the Montana winter, she finally said, but you're not as cold as you want to be. I can see it. You can see nothing. I can see a man who's so scared of being hurt again that he's built a fortress and called it strength. She stepped closer to the gate. I can see someone who thinks isolation equals power, who's convinced himself that rejecting everyone first means he's in control. Elias's jaw tightened. Your 5 minutes are up. I'm not finished. Yes, you are. Marie, show Miss Hale to the... I came here because I heard about the man who refuses the world, Mara interrupted. I heard about 43 rejections, about families turned away, alliances rejected, a fortune that could buy half of Montana, but apparently can't buy one real conversation. You heard gossip. I heard pain. She gripped the gate bars, and Elias saw her hands, calloused, scarred, the hands of someone who'd worked hard for everything. I heard about a man so lonely, he's forgotten what it feels like to be seen as human instead of as a commodity. You don't know anything about me. I know you're standing in a doorway at 1 a.m. arguing with a stranger instead of going to bed. I know you're drinking alone in a mansion built for a family you don't have. I know that every woman who's walked through your gates has wanted something from you, and you're so tired of it you can't imagine any other possibility. The accuracy of it stunned him into momentary silence. Mara didn't smile at her victory. I'm not here to take anything from you, Mr. Thornridge. I'm here to give you something you've probably forgotten exists. And what's that? A choice. The wind picked up, howling through the gate bars, and Elias realized he was freezing despite his anger. Mara stood in the full force of it, snow collecting on her shoulders, and didn't seem to notice. What kind of choice? He heard himself ask. The choice to let someone see you without taking from you. To stand in the same room as another person without calculating the cost. To remember what it feels like when someone shows up not because they want your land or your name, but because they understand what it's like to be exactly where you are right now. And where is that? Alone. She said it softly. So completely alone that you've convinced yourself it's what you want. Something in Elias's chest cracked. Not broke, but cracked, like ice under pressure. He wanted to slam the door, send her away, add her to the list of rejections. But his hand stayed on the doorframe. Why? The question came out rougher than intended. Why would you ride 3 days through snow just to tell me that? Mara's expression shifted, and for the first time, he saw something vulnerable beneath her directness.
"Because someone did it for me once," she said, "when I was where you are now, and it saved my life."
The confession hung in the frozen air between them. Elias looked at this woman, this stranger who'd appeared at his gates in the middle of the night, making no demands, asking for nothing, offering only truth. Every instinct screamed at him to reject her like all the others, to protect himself, to stay safe behind his walls. But Marie's words echoed in his head. "You're killing yourself." And Thomas's. "Never seen you cruel before." And Elizabeth's, from 15 years ago. Does it matter? Maybe it did matter. Maybe that was the problem. "Come inside," he said quietly, "before you freeze to death on my conscience." Mara's eyes widened slightly. Surprise, maybe, or victory. She nodded once and led her horse through the gate Elias hadn't realized he'd opened. As she passed him in the doorway, she paused. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. I haven't decided if you're brave or crazy. Can it be both?" Despite himself, despite everything, Elias felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but close enough that it startled him. Marie appeared to take Mara's coat and arrange for her horse to be stabled. Elias led the way to his study, acutely aware of this stranger following him into his private sanctuary. The fire had burned low. The broken glass still glittered on the hearth. "Rough night?" Mara asked, nodding toward the shards. "You could say that." She moved to the fireplace, warming her hands. Up close, Elias could see she was younger than her bearing suggested, maybe late 20s, but her eyes held years beyond that. He recognized the look. He saw it in his own reflection often enough. "How long since you've had a real conversation with someone?" she asked. "I talk to people every day." "That's not what I asked." Elias poured himself another whiskey, didn't offer her one. "Years. Maybe never. Because they all want something." "Yes? And you think I'm different?" "I think you're a better actress than most." Mara turned from the fire to face him fully. "I don't want your money, Mr. Thornridge. I don't want your land. I don't want marriage or alliance or access to your social connections. I don't want anything you can give me materially." "Then what do you want?" She held his gaze steadily. "I want you to remember that you're human, that's all." "Why?" "Because I spent 2 years forgetting it myself, and when I finally remembered, it was the hardest and best thing I ever did." Elias sat heavily in his chair, exhaustion catching up with him. "You're not making sense." "I will, if you let me stay long enough to explain." Mara moved to the other chair but didn't sit. "I'm not asking for a room in your mansion. I'm not asking to be your guest. But I am asking for time. A few days, maybe, to show you that not everyone is playing the game you think they are. And if I say no, then I'll leave, ride back the way I came. You'll never see me again, and you can add me to your list of rejections, number 44. She paused. "But I think you're tired of that list. I think you want something different, even if you don't know what that looks like anymore." He should say no. Every ounce of self-preservation demanded it. This woman was dangerous, not because she wanted to take from him, but because she wanted him to give something far more valuable than money or land. She wanted his trust, and Elias Thornridge hadn't trusted anyone in 15 years. "1 week," he heard himself say. "You can stay 1 week, but you sleep in the guest quarters. You eat with the staff. You don't have access to my office or my personal papers. And if I decide at any point that this is a con, you're gone." Mara's expression didn't change. "Fair enough. I mean it. Any hint of deception—" "Mr. Thornridge, She cut him off gently. "I survived things that would have killed most people. I learned to read lies before I learned to read books. If I wanted to con you, I'd be much better at pretending I wasn't here to challenge everything you believe about human nature." Despite himself, he almost smiled again. "You're either the most honest person I've ever met or the most dangerous." "Still can't be both?" This time he did smile. Small, brief, but real. Marie knocked and entered with linens. "I've prepared the blue room, Miss Hale. It's warm and has a good view of the mountains." "Thank you." Mara stood, then looked back at Elias. "Get some sleep, Mr. Thornridge. You look like you need it." "Don't tell me what I need. Why? Because everyone else does, so you've trained yourself to reject it automatically? She moved toward the door, then paused. Sometimes what we need and what we want are the same thing. We've just forgotten how to recognize it. She left before he could respond. Elias sat alone in his study, staring at the fire, trying to figure out what had just happened. He'd let a complete stranger into his home. A woman with no family, no connections, no apparent agenda. Everything about it screamed trap. But she'd looked at him, really looked at him, and seen things no one else bothered to notice. The loneliness, the fear, the way he'd weaponized rejection to feel powerful. He drained his whiskey glass and stood, bones aching with tiredness he'd been ignoring for hours. Tomorrow he'd probably regret this decision. Tonight, though, walking through his empty mansion toward his empty bedroom, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Curiosity. What would a week with someone who wanted nothing look like? What happened when the transaction disappeared? When the angle collapsed? When another human being showed up just to be human alongside you? He had no idea. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, Elias Thornridge was willing to find out. Morning came with this kind of brutal cold that turned breath to ice crystals. Elias woke to sunlight streaming through windows he'd forgotten to close, his head pounding from too much whiskey and too little sleep. He dressed slowly, his body protesting each movement. The house felt different, quieter somehow, despite the usual sounds of staff preparing breakfast. He couldn't explain it. Thomas found him in the stable, checking on the horses. "She's real then," the foreman said without preamble. "Thought maybe I dreamed her when I saw her horse this morning." "She's real." "Marie says she's staying a week." "Marie talks too much." Thomas leaned against the stall door, studying him. "You planning to add her to the list?" "Probably." Elias ran a hand along his horse's flank. "Haven't decided yet." "What makes her different from the others?" "She doesn't want anything." "Everyone wants something." "That's what I said." Elias turned to face him. "But I don't know what her angle is yet." "Maybe she doesn't have one." "Everyone has an angle, Thomas. You taught me that yourself." The old man shrugged. "I also taught you that sometimes the best way to know if water's safe is to take a drink. Analysis only gets you so far." Before Elias could respond, Mara appeared in the stable doorway. She'd changed into fresh clothes, still practical, still simple, and her dark hair was pulled back from her face. She looked like she belonged there, somehow, like she'd been part of the ranch for years instead of hours. "Morning," she said. "Am I interrupting?" "Yes," Elias said. "No," Thomas said at the same time. Mara's mouth quirked. "I'll go with the friendlier answer. Thomas, right? The foreman?" "That's me, ma'am. Call me Mara. And before you ask, no, I'm not here to seduce your boss or steal his fortune. I know that's probably what everyone's thinking." Thomas's eyebrows rose. "Direct. I like that." "Life's too short for dancing around things." She moved into the stable, stopping to greet the horses with an ease that spoke of familiarity. "Beautiful animals? You raise them yourself?" "Some. Others we buy from Montana breeders." Elias watched her stroke the nose of his mare, the horse responding with unusual gentleness. "You ride often?" "Used to. Haven't had a horse of my own in years." Something crossed her face. Memory. Loss. "Had to sell mine when, well, hard times require hard choices." "What happened?" The question came out before Elias could stop it. Mara looked at him over the horse's head. "Is that what we're doing? Trading histories? You said you wanted real conversation." "I did, but I didn't expect you to actually want it." She smiled slightly. "My father raised horses in Wyoming. Small operation, nothing like this. He taught me everything, how to read their moods, when to push and when to let them rest, the difference between breaking a spirit and building trust." "Sounds like a good man." "He was, until he wasn't." Mara's hand stilled on the mare's neck. "He lost everything in a bad deal. Partner cheated him, took the land, the horses, everything. It destroyed him. He started drinking, got mean. One night he just gave up, walked out into a snowstorm and never came back." The casual way she said it made it worse somehow. "How old were you?" Elias asked quietly. 17. My mother had died when I was young, so it was just him and me. When he left, I was alone." She resumed stroking the horse.
Sold what was left, tried to make it on my own. Didn't go well at first. What did you do? Survived, however I could. Her eyes met his, and he saw steel there. You don't want the details, Mr. Thornridge. They're not pretty. Thomas cleared his throat. I should check on the fence repairs. Nice meeting you, Mara. You too.
When they were alone, Elias moved closer. You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to. I know, but you need to understand something. Mara turned to face him fully. I've been where you are. Maybe not exactly. I didn't have your wealth or your name, but the isolation, the distrust, the certainty that everyone has an ulterior motive. I lived there for years. It nearly killed me. What changed? Someone saw through it. Someone refused to let me hide behind my walls. She paused. Her name was Sarah. I met her in Denver, working at the same boarding house. I was angry all the time back then, defensive, pushing everyone away before they could hurt me. Sound familiar? Elias said nothing. Sarah didn't give up, Mara continued. She kept showing up, kept being kind even when I was cruel, kept offering friendship even when I threw it back in her face, and eventually I ran out of energy to fight her. I let her in. Just a crack at first, then more, and it saved my life. Where is she now? Dead. Cholera outbreak 3 years ago. Mara's voice didn't waver, but her eyes darkened. She was the closest thing to family I had. When she died, I almost went back to who I was before, almost built those walls up again. But I couldn't, because she'd taught me something I couldn't unlearn. What? That being alone is easy, being vulnerable is terrifying, but only one of those actually keeps you alive. The words hit harder than Elias expected. He turned away, focusing on the horses, because looking at her face made something in his chest ache. You think you're very wise, he said. I think I'm very tired of watching people destroy themselves for no good reason. And you think that's what I'm doing? I think 43 rejection speaks for itself. Elias spun back to face her. Those women didn't want me. They wanted— I know what they wanted, Mara interrupted. But do you know what you wanted? Or have you been so busy protecting yourself that you forgot to ask? I want to be left alone. No, you don't. You want to be safe. There's a difference. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see flecks of amber in her dark eyes. Being alone doesn't make you safe, Mr. Thornridge. It just makes you lonely, and lonely people do desperate things eventually, like showing up at a stranger's gate at 1 a.m. She smiled then, genuinely, exactly like that. Despite himself, Elias felt his defenses lowering, not collapsing, he wasn't that far gone, but shifting. This woman was dangerous, not because she wanted to hurt him, but because she made him want to trust her. Tell me something, he said. If you're not here for money or marriage or any of the usual reasons, what do you get out of this? Why spend a week trying to convince a stranger he's allowed to be human? Mara considered the question carefully. Because Sarah did it for me. And before she died, she made me promise something. What? That I'd pass it forward, that when I met someone locked in the same cage I'd been in, I'd do for them what she did for me? Mara's expression softened. I've kept that promise 3 times now. You're the 4th. And the other 3? One's running a school in Colorado, one's married with kids in Oregon, one's traveling the country doing exactly what I'm doing, finding trapped people and reminding them they have keys. She paused. It's not about fixing you, Mr. Thornridge. It's about reminding you that you're not as broken as you think. Elias wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways she was wrong, all the reasons his walls were necessary, all the evidence that people couldn't be trusted. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he heard himself say, I haven't told anyone about Elizabeth in 15 years. Mara waited. She was— He stopped, started again. I thought she was different. Turned out she was just better at hiding her agenda. What happened? So he told her. Not everything, some wounds were still too raw, but enough. The courtship, the proposal, the revelation about her father's debts. The way Elizabeth had looked at him when he'd asked if any of it had been real. Does it matter? Mara repeated when he got to that part. That's what she said? Word for word. And you've been punishing every woman since for what she did. I've been protecting myself. From what? More disappointment? More pain? Mara shook her head. You can't protect yourself from life, Mr. Thornridge. You can only choose whether to live it or hide from it. Easy for you to say. You're not the one people are trying to use. You're right. I was the one being used. Her voice went flat. After my father died and I sold everything, I ended up in Denver with nothing. A man offered me work, said he ran a boarding house, needed kitchen help, seemed legitimate. Elias felt his stomach drop at her tone. It wasn't a boarding house, Mara continued, and the work wasn't in the kitchen. He locked the doors at night, took our clothes, said we owed him for room and board, that we'd work off the debt. We all knew what that meant. Mara, I was there 3 months before I escaped. 3 months of being treated like property, like currency, like something to be used and discarded. She met his eyes steadily. So, yes, Mr. Thornridge, I know what it's like to be seen as a commodity. The difference is I didn't let it make me cruel. The air in the stable felt too thick to breathe. How did you get out? Elias asked quietly. Fire. Someone left a lamp burning. In the chaos, I ran, barefoot in the snow with nothing but the dress I was wearing. She smiled without humor. That's when I met Sarah. She found me half frozen in an alley, took me in, saved my life. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be better. Mara's voice gentled. You've been hurt. I understand that. But you've also spent 15 years hurting other people to prove you can't be hurt anymore. That's not strength. That's fear wearing a crown. The truth of it burned. Elias walked to the stable door, needing air, needing space. The Montana landscape stretched endlessly before him. His land, his empire, his fortress. All of it built to keep the world at a distance. What if you're wrong? He said without turning around. What if letting people in just gives them more ways to destroy you? What if I'm right? Mara countered. What if keeping people out is what's destroying you? He had no answer to that. They stood in silence for a long moment, the only sound the horses shifting in their stalls. Finally, Elias turned back to her. 1 week, he said. You have 1 week to show me whatever it is you think I need to see, but I'm not making any promises. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for possibility. Mara extended her hand. Deal? Elias looked at her outstretched hand, calloused, scarred, steady. Everything about this felt dangerous. Everything about her threatened the careful distance he'd maintained for years. He shook her hand anyway. Deal. The handshake lasted 3 seconds, long enough for Elias to notice the strength in Mara's grip, the way her palm pressed against his without hesitation. When she pulled away, he felt the absence of contact more acutely than he wanted to admit. So what now? He asked, shoving his hands into his pockets. Do you have some grand plan to fix me, or are we making this up as we go? Fixing implies you're broken. Mara moved back toward the horses, running her fingers along the stall doors. You're not broken, Mr. Thornridge. You're just stuck. Semantics. Context. She stopped at the last stall where a young stallion paced restlessly. What's his story? Elias joined her, grateful for the shift in focus. Bought him 6 months ago from a breeder in Wyoming. Best bloodline I've ever seen. Fast, strong, perfect conformation. But he won't let anyone ride him. Bucks off every person who tries. Thomas thinks he's untrainable. Mara studied the horse carefully. He's scared. He's aggressive. Same thing, usually. She opened the stall door before Elias could stop her, stepping inside with movement so calm they barely registered his emotion. The stallion's ears went back, but he didn't charge. Mara, that's not... Shh. She didn't look at Elias, keeping her focus entirely on the horse. Hey there, beautiful. Yeah, I see you. I see how scared you are. The stallion snorted, tossing his head. Someone hurt you, didn't they? Mara's voice stayed soft, steady. Taught you that people mean pain. So now you fight first. Ask questions never. I know that feeling. Elias watched, transfixed, as she moved closer. The horse should have bolted or attacked. Instead, he stood trembling, caught between flight and fight. It's okay to be scared, Mara continued, but you don't have to be alone with it. That's the thing about fear. It gets bigger when you're by yourself. Smaller when someone sees it and doesn't run away. Her hand extended slowly, palm up, non-threatening. The stallion's nostrils flared as he scented her. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Then with visible hesitation, the horse lowered his head and let her touch his muzzle. There you go, Mara whispered. See? Not so terrible. Elias felt something shift in his chest,
Recognition, maybe. Or something dangerously close to hope. He cleared his throat. How did you do that? I didn't do anything. I just didn't give him a reason to be more afraid. She stroked the stallion's neck, her movements gentle but confident. He doesn't need to be fixed or broken or tamed. He needs to know he's safe. You're talking about the horse, right? Mara glanced at him over her shoulder, one eyebrow raised. Am I? Before he could respond, Thomas's voice called from outside. Boss, you got visitors. Elias's jaw tightened. Tell them I'm not receiving. Already did. They're insisting. Thomas appeared in the doorway, looking apologetic. It's the Vanderbilt party. They say they traveled all the way from New York. I don't care if they traveled from the moon. Send them away. Mr. Thornridge, Thomas lowered his voice. The daughter's crying. Her mother looks like she might faint. They've been on trains for 3 days. Guilt and anger warred in Elias's gut. He turned to Mara, who'd stepped out of the stall and was watching him with those two perceptive eyes. This is what you wanted to see, isn't it? Bitterness crept into his voice. The great Elias Thornridge being cruel to desperate people. I wanted to see what you do when you're cornered, Mara said quietly. Whether you default to walls or try something different. What's different? They're here for the same reason everyone comes here. Maybe. Or maybe they're here because a 17-year-old girl is being forced into something she doesn't want, and you're the only person with enough power to say no for her. The words hit like a slap. Elias stared at her, then at Thomas, then at the stable floor. 5 minutes, he finally said. I'll give them 5 minutes. Thomas nodded and disappeared. Mara fell into step beside Elias as he walked toward the main house, their boots crunching in the frozen snow. You don't have to be mean, she said, but you don't have to be a savior either. Just be honest. I'm always honest. You're always sharp. There's a difference. They reached the front parlor where the Vanderbilt family waited. The father stood ramrod straight, radiating the kind of old money authority that came from generations of never hearing the word no. The mother perched on the edge of a chair, her face pale and pinched. Between them stood the daughter. She couldn't have been more than 18, pretty in the way expensive things were pretty, polished, refined, utterly devoid of anything real. Her eyes were red from crying, but when she saw Elias, she straightened, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. Mr. Thornridge, the father stepped forward, hand extended. Charles Vanderbilt. Thank you for seeing us. Elias didn't take his hand. I didn't agree to see you. You insisted. Charles's smile faltered but held. Yes, well, we've come a long way to discuss a potential arrangement between our families. There is no arrangement to discuss. If you just hear us out, Mr. Vanderbilt. Elias cut him off, his voice flat. I'm going to save us all some time. I'm not interested in marrying your daughter. I'm not interested in any alliance with your family. I don't care about your social connections or your business interests or whatever dowry you've prepared. The answer is no. The mother made a small sound of distress. The daughter's face went white. Mr. Thornridge, please. Charles's composure cracked slightly. If this is about money, we can negotiate. It's not about money. Then what? What do you want? Nothing you can give me. Silence filled the parlor like smoke. The daughter stared at the floor, her shoulders shaking. Charles looked like he wanted to hit something. The mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Mara, standing near the doorway, spoke for the first time. Can I ask your daughter something? Everyone turned to look at her. Charles frowned. Who are you? Nobody important. But I'm curious. Mara addressed the girl directly. What's your name? Victoria. The word came out barely above a whisper. Victoria, do you want to marry Mr. Thornridge? The question hung in the air like a grenade. Victoria's eyes went wide, darting between her parents and Mara. It's a simple question, Mara said gently. Do you want this? What she wants is irrelevant, Charles snapped. This is about family duty, about... I asked her, not you. The steel in Mara's voice surprised even Elias. Charles sputtered, his face reddening, but Mara kept her focus on Victoria. You can tell the truth, she said. Nothing bad will happen to you right now, in this room. I promise. Victoria's hands twisted in her skirt. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet Elias had to strain to hear it. No, I don't want to marry him. I don't want to marry anyone. I want to go to Paris and study art like my aunt did, but father says that's frivolous, that my duty is to. She stopped, looking at her father with naked fear. Victoria, be quiet, her mother hissed. No. Mara moved closer to the girl. Keep going. What's your duty?
To secure our family's position, to marry well, to produce heirs. Victoria's voice gained strength with each word, years of suppressed frustration bleeding through. To be pretty and polite and grateful for the opportunity to be sold to the highest bidder like a show, that's enough. Charles's shout made everyone flinch. You ungrateful child. Do you have any idea what we've sacrificed to bring you here? The expense, the planning, the complete disregard for what she actually wants? Mara finished. Charles rounded on her. This is none of your business. You're right. It's not. Mara looked at Elias. But it is his. Elias felt every eye in the room fix on him. He could send them away, add them to his list, prove once again that he was untouchable. Or he could do what Mara had suggested, be honest instead of sharp. He took a breath and looked at Victoria. Your father's right about one thing. I don't know you. You don't know me. Any marriage between us would be exactly what you said. A transaction. Hope flickered and died in Victoria's eyes. But, Elias continued, you deserve better than that. And despite what your father thinks, so do I. Charles's face went purple. Now see here. I'm not finished. Elias's voice didn't rise, but something in it made Charles shut his mouth. You came here hoping to trade your daughter for access to the Thornridge name and fortune. I understand that. It's how these things work. But I'm not participating anymore. You arrogant? I'll give you $2,000, Elias said calmly, for your travel expenses and inconvenience. I'll also write a letter to the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, recommending Victoria for their art program. I know the director. My mother studied there. Stunned silence. Victoria's mouth fell open. You... What? You want to study art? So study art. Take the money, book passage to Paris, tell your parents you're visiting cousins, or whatever story makes this easier. Elias pulled out his checkbook and began writing. Live your life, just not here, and not as my wife. This is outrageous, Charles sputtered. We didn't come here for charity. Then refuse it. Elias tore off the check and held it out. Go home empty-handed, or take what I'm offering and let your daughter have a chance at happiness. Your choice. The mother reached for the check, but Charles caught her wrist. For a long moment, pride and practicality warred on his face. Finally, practicality won. He snatched the check from Elias's hand. This doesn't make you noble, he spat. I know. Elias moved to his desk, writing the letter to Paris with quick, efficient strokes. I'm not trying to be noble. I'm trying to be honest. He sealed the letter and handed it to Victoria, whose hands shook as she took it. Thank you, she whispered, and the genuine gratitude in her voice made Elias's throat tighten. Don't thank me. Just do something worth doing with your life. Marie appeared to escort the Vanderbilts out. As they filed past, Victoria paused beside Mara. How did you know, the girl asked, that I wanted to tell the truth? Because I was you once, Mara said, and someone gave me permission to want something different. Now you have the same permission. When they were gone, Elias sank into his chair, suddenly exhausted. Mara sat across from him, silent for once. Well, he finally said. Satisfied? You gotta see me throw money at a problem instead of facing it. I saw you choose kindness over cruelty. That's not nothing. It's exactly nothing. I'm still alone. They still came here wanting something. The situation hasn't changed. You changed it, Mara leaned forward. You could have sent them away with harsh words and your pride intact. Instead, you saw a girl who needed help and you helped her. That's growth. It's guilt. It's both. And that's okay. She stood, walking to the window that overlooked the ranch. You know what the problem is with walls, Mr. Thornridge? They keep people out, but they also keep you in. You've been locked in this fortress so long you've forgotten there's a door. Poetic. True, she turned back to him. That stallion in the stable? He's you. Scared, defensive, convinced that everyone who approaches means harm. But when someone shows up without an agenda, without demands, just presence, he remembers he doesn't have to fight. I'm not a horse. No, you're harder to reach. Mara's expression softened. But not impossible. Elias wanted to argue, to point out all the ways she was wrong. Instead, he found himself asking, "What happened after Sarah died? You said you almost went back to building walls." Mara returned to her chair, settling in like she had all the time in the world. "I did go back. For about 6 months. Pushed everyone away, took jobs that kept me isolated, convinced myself that caring about people was too dangerous." She paused. "Then I met a woman in Colorado. She was dying, cancer, had maybe 3 months left. Why did that matter? Because she was alone. No family, no friends, just her and a rented room and pain. I was working as a nurse's aide. It was my job to check on her, change bandages, make sure she took her medicine." Mara's eyes went distant. "She asked me one day why I looked so angry all the time. I told her it was none of her business. She laughed and said dying people don't have time for boundaries." Despite himself, Elias felt pulled into the story. "Her name was Ruth," Mara continued, "and she was the most stubborn, infuriating person I'd ever met. She'd ask me personal questions, tell me stories about her life, act like we were friends even though I'd made it clear I wasn't interested in friends. But she wore you down. She did. Little by little. Until one day I realized I was visiting her on my days off, bringing her books she mentioned wanting to read, sitting with her when the pain got bad." Mara smiled sadly. "When she died, I was holding her hand, and she said something I've never forgotten." "What?" "She said, 'Thank you for letting me matter. Not for taking care of her or being her friend, for letting her matter to me. For letting her exist in my life as more than just another person to keep at a distance.'" The words settled into the quiet room like snow. "That's when I understood what Sarah had been trying to teach me," Mara said. "That mattering to someone and letting them matter to you, that's the whole point. Not safety, not protection, not avoiding pain, just mattering." Elias stared at the fire, watching flames consume wood that had no choice but to burn. "What if I don't know how to do that anymore?" The admission came out rough, unplanned. "Then you learn." Mara's voice was gentle. "The same way you learn to ride or run a ranch or build an empire. You just start." "Start how?" "By answering a question honestly." She met his eyes. "What scares you more, being hurt again or dying without ever letting anyone close enough to hurt you?" Elias opened his mouth to deflect, to make a cutting remark, to retreat behind familiar defenses. But something about the way Mara looked at him, patient, unflinching, genuinely curious, made the armor feel heavier than usual. "The second one," he heard himself say. "Because at least if someone hurts me, it means I tried. But if I die like this, alone in this mansion with nothing but my pride and my money, then what was the point of any of it?" Silence stretched between them, but it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt like space for the truth to breathe. "My father used to say something," Elias continued, surprised to find himself talking. "He said a man could own the whole world and still be poor if he had no one to share it with. I thought he was being sentimental. Now I think he was warning me." "Warning you about what?" "About becoming this." He gestured at the study, the mansion, the empire beyond the windows, building something so big and so empty that it collapses under its own weight. Mara nodded slowly. "But you're still here. The empire hasn't collapsed. Not yet. Not ever if you make different choices." "I don't know how to make different choices. This is all I know. Rejection, distance, walls." "Then let me teach you something new." Mara stood, extending her hand. "Come on." "Where?" "Does it matter? You just admitted you're tired of doing the same thing, so do something different." Elias looked at her outstretched hand, the same calloused palm that had gentled a frightened stallion, that carried scars from a past she'd survived instead of letting it destroy her. Every instinct screamed at him to stay in his chair, in his study, in his fortress. He took her hand and stood. She led him outside, across the frozen yard to where the fence line marked the boundary of his immediate property. Beyond it, Montana stretched endlessly, mountains in the distance, land rolling away like the world itself was breathing. "What are we doing out here?" Elias asked, his breath fogging in the cold. "Tell me about this place. Not the business side. The real side." "What's the difference?" "The business side is numbers and assets. The real side is why it matters to you." Elias shoved his hands in his pockets, studying the landscape he'd stopped really seeing years ago. My father brought me here when I was 8, right to this spot. He said, "Someday this will all be yours, but land doesn't care who owns it. It just cares who loves it." Did you love it? I thought I did. When I was young, before I knew what ownership actually meant. He kicked at the frozen ground. Now I don't know if I love it or if I'm just afraid of losing it. Why would you lose it? Because everything gets lost eventually. People die, deals fall through, fortunes change. He looked at her. Love makes you vulnerable to loss, so maybe the smart thing is not to love anything too much. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. It's practical. It's cowardly. The word hit like a physical blow. Elias spun to face her, anger flaring hot. You don't get to— I do get to, Mara interrupted calmly, because you made a deal. 1 week, and part of that week is hearing truths you don't want to hear. You call me a coward and expect me to just accept it? I expect you to consider whether I'm right. She didn't back down, didn't soften her words. You've spent 15 years calling your fear strength, calling isolation independence, calling loneliness safety. But standing here now, looking at land you're afraid to love because you might lose it, what do you call that? Elias's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to yell, to storm off, to prove her wrong by demonstrating exactly the behavior she'd just described. Instead, he forced himself to breathe. What do you want me to say? The question came out tired. That you're right? That I'm scared? Fine. I'm terrified every single day that if I let myself care about anything or anyone, it'll get taken away just like everything else. That I'll end up like my father, dead in a ditch because he loved my mother too much to watch the road. Happy now? No. Mara's expression shifted, the challenge melting into something softer. I'm not happy you're in pain, but I'm glad you admitted it. Why? Because you can't heal what you won't acknowledge. Elias turned away, staring at the mountains. I don't want to heal. I want to be left alone. No, you don't. You want to stop hurting. There's a difference. Mara moved to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Being alone doesn't stop the hurt. It just means you face it by yourself, and that's the hardest way to do anything. They stood in silence, the wind cutting across the open land like it was searching for something lost. Finally, Elias spoke. When Elizabeth left, I told myself it didn't matter, that she was just one person, that I'd move on, that I was better off. He swallowed hard. But every woman who came after her, I saw Elizabeth. Every smile was calculated, every word was strategy, every gesture was transaction, and maybe they were, or maybe I just couldn't see anything else anymore. Probably both. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be true. Mara turned to look at him fully. You've been punishing innocent people for what one guilty person did. That's not justice. It's just spreading the pain around. I know. The admission felt like pulling glass from a wound. I know, and I can't seem to stop. You just did. What? Victoria Vanderbilt. You saw her pain and you chose to help instead of hurt. That's stopping. That's one time. One time is how everything starts. Mara's hand found his arm, the touch light but grounding. You don't have to fix everything today. You just have to do one thing different than you did yesterday. Elias looked down at where her hand rested on his coat sleeve. Such a small point of contact, barely noticeable, but he felt it like an anchor in a storm. What if I fail? He asked quietly. What if I try to be different and I'm just not? Then you fail, and you try again tomorrow. She squeezed his arm once and let go. Failure isn't the ending, Mr. Thornridge. Giving up is. They walked back to the house in silence, but it felt different than the silence Elias usually carried. Less heavy, like sharing the weight had made it easier to bear. Thomas met them at the door, his expression careful. That went better than expected. Meaning? Meaning you didn't make a young girl cry. Progress. Despite everything, Elias almost smiled. Low bar. You've been limbo dancing under it for years, Thomas said dryly. I'll take what I can get. Mara laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so unexpected, so genuine that both men turned to stare at her. What? She asked. Nothing, Elias said. Just, people don't usually laugh here. Why not? Because I don't give them much to laugh about. Then maybe that's the next thing to work on. She headed inside, leaving them in the cold. Learning how to be someone people want to laugh with instead of walk on eggshells around. Thomas watched her go, then looked at Elias. I like her. That's because you're easy. I'm practical. And practically speaking, she's the first person in years who's treated you like a human being instead of a bank account or a status symbol. The old foreman clapped him on the shoulder. Don't screw this up. It's not like that. Maybe not yet. But something's shifting. I can see it. Thomas headed toward the stables. Question is whether you'll let it shift or fight it every step of the way. Alone in the doorway, Elias considered fighting it. Fighting felt familiar, safe. But as he looked across his empty, perfect land, he couldn't shake Mara's words. One thing different than yesterday. He'd let Victoria go with kindness instead of cruelty. He'd admitted fear instead of hiding behind anger. He'd stood beside someone without calculating cost. Small things, probably meaningless, but they felt like cracks in a wall he'd thought was impenetrable. And he couldn't decide if that terrified him or gave him something he'd forgotten how to feel. Hope. Hope lasted exactly until dinner. Elias sat at the head of his dining table, a massive thing built to seat 20, with Mara across from him and 12 empty chairs between them. Marie had set out a meal elaborate enough for visiting dignitaries: roasted venison, potatoes, 3 kinds of vegetables, fresh bread that filled the room with warmth. All of it wasted on 2 people who barely knew each other. This is ridiculous, Elias said, gesturing at the spread. It's dinner. Mara cut into her venison with practiced efficiency. It's theater. Look at us, sitting at opposite ends like we're negotiating a treaty. Whose fault is that? He had no good answer. The seating arrangement had been automatic, muscle memory from years of formal dinners with people he didn't trust. The fact that he'd done it without thinking made it worse. Come here, he said abruptly. Mara raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? Move. Sit here. He indicated the chair to his right. This is stupid. She studied him for a moment, then stood, bringing her plate with her. When she settled into the closer seat, the table suddenly felt less like a battlefield and more like furniture. Better? She asked. Different. I'll take it. She resumed eating, seemingly unbothered by the shift. Marie's an excellent cook. She'd appreciate hearing that. I usually eat in my study. Why? Because sitting alone in a dining room built for a family I don't have feels pathetic. Sitting alone in my study feels like a choice. Mara set down her fork. You know what I notice about you? I'm sure you're about to tell me. You're very good at explanations. You can justify every wall, every rejection, every isolated choice. It's impressive, actually. Most people aren't that self-aware about their own defenses. But self-awareness without change is just sophisticated denial. Elias took a long drink of wine. You don't pull punches, do you? Would you prefer I did? Honestly, yes. It would be more comfortable. Comfort is what got you here. Mara gestured around the empty room. 43 rejections worth of comfort. I thought we were past that number. Are we? Or did you just pause the count because I confused you? The accuracy stung. Elias pushed food around his plate, appetite gone. What do you want from me, Mara? Real answer. Because this constant prodding, this relentless honesty, it has to be leading somewhere. It's leading to you deciding whether you want to live differently or die exactly like this. Dramatic. Accurate. She turned in her chair to face him fully. You have maybe 40 more years if you're lucky. You can spend them alone, convinced you're protecting yourself, building higher walls until you can't even see over them anymore. Or you can take a risk. What risk? Mattering to someone. Letting someone matter to you. Actually living instead of just existing in an expensive prison. Elias met her eyes, saw no manipulation there, no hidden agenda. Just frustration born from caring about something he couldn't understand yet. Why does it bother you so much? He asked quietly. My choices, my isolation. You barely know me. Because I was you. The words came out fierce. For 2 years after I escaped that place in Denver, I was exactly you. Different circumstances, sure. I was broke and you're rich. I was nobody and you're powerful. But the fear, the walls, the absolute certainty that letting anyone close would destroy me, that was identical. So you see me as a project, something to fix because you fixed yourself. I see you as someone who's drowning and doesn't realize it because he's been underwater so long he thinks breathing is the abnormal state. Mara's hand found his on the table, her grip firm. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm trying to remind you that air exists. The touch sent electricity up his arm. Elias wanted to pull away, maintain distance, retreat to safety. Instead, he turned his hand over, letting their palms press together. This scares me, he admitted. Good. If it didn't, you wouldn't be human. They sat like that for several seconds, hands clasped on the polished wood, the absurdly elaborate dinner cooling around them. Finally, Mara pulled back, returning to her meal as if the moment had been perfectly ordinary. Tell me about your mother, she said between bites. The subject change gave him whiplash. Why? Because you mentioned she studied in Paris. Because your father loved her enough to die distracted. Because I'm curious who taught you that people were worth caring about before Elizabeth taught you they weren't. Elias picked up his wine again, buying time. Talking about his mother felt dangerous, like opening a door he'd locked years ago. She was an artist, he finally said. Painter. Met my father when he was in Paris buying horses. He saw her in a cafe, arguing with some critic about the soul of color or some pretentious thing. Said he fell in love watching her defend beauty like it mattered more than money. Sounds like him and you are different. We were. He believed in grand gestures and romance and all the things that make good stories but terrible strategies. Elias stared into his glass. She painted until the day she died. The carriage accident. They were coming back from Denver. She'd been showing her work in a gallery. Father was driving, distracted, looking at her instead of the road. They went off a cliff. How old were you? 19. Old enough to run the ranch, not old enough to run it well. He set down his glass with more force than intended. The first year was chaos. Creditors circling, workers quitting, everyone assuming I'd fail because I was young and grieving and had no idea what I was doing. But you didn't fail. No. I got hard. I got smart. I stopped trusting people who smiled while holding knives behind their backs. He looked at her. And I stopped believing that love was anything but a liability that got people killed. Mara absorbed this quietly. Your mother loved your father. That love gave them joy. The accident was just what happens when you care more about a person than self-preservation. Elias pushed his chair back, needing movement. They could have hired a driver. They could have stayed home. But no, my father wanted to support her art, and she wanted him there, and their love made them careless. And I buried them both at 19. So you decided never to be careless. I decided never to be that vulnerable. It's not the same thing. Elias paced to the window, watching snow fall in the darkness beyond. Explain the difference then. Because from where I stand, vulnerability and carelessness look identical. Carelessness is ignoring real danger. Vulnerability is acknowledging danger and choosing connection anyway. Mara joined him at the window. Your parents weren't careless. They were present with each other. The accident was just bad luck. Bad luck that killed them. Bad luck that happened. Correlation isn't causation. He turned on her, anger rising. Don't talk to me like I'm stupid. I know the difference between... Do you? She didn't flinch from his anger. Because you've spent 15 years treating every human connection like a cliff waiting to kill you. That's not wisdom. That's trauma running your life. The word landed like a slap. Trauma. Such a clinical term for the tangled mess of fear and loss and rage that had shaped every decision since his parents died. I'm not traumatized, he said, but even he heard how unconvincing it sounded. You watched your parents die because they loved each other. Then the first woman you tried to love used you. Those aren't small things, Elias. They're the kind of things that break people. He noticed distantly that she'd used his first name, not Mr. Thornridge, just Elias. It felt too intimate, too personal. It felt right. I'm not broken, he said, but the protest was weak. No, you're not, but you're acting like you are. Mara's voice gentled. Broken people hide. You're hiding. Behind money, behind walls, behind 43 rejections. That's not strength. That's a scared 19-year-old who never got to grieve properly because he had to become a man overnight. Something cracked in Elias's chest. Not his armor this time, but something deeper. The foundation he'd built his entire adult life on. He turned away from her, gripping the window frame so hard his knuckles went white. Don't, he said roughly. Don't what? Don't see me like that. Don't reduce me to some wounded boy who needs therapy and sympathy. I'm not reducing you. I'm seeing all of you. The powerful rancher and the grieving son. The man who rejects everyone and the boy who lost everything. They're both real. The boy is dead. Is he? Because from here, he looks like he's running your entire life. Elias spun back to face her, ready to argue, to defend, to retreat behind familiar anger. But Mara's expression stopped him. She wasn't judging. She wasn't pitying. She was just seeing him, really seeing him, and refusing to look away. What do you want from me? His voice came out broken. You want me to cry? To admit I'm damaged? To fall apart so you can feel like you saved someone? I want you to stop performing. She stepped closer. You're so busy being Elias Thornridge, master of the Montana Empire, that you've forgotten how to just be Elias. A person, flawed and scared and carrying weight that's too heavy for one person alone. I don't know how to be just Elias anymore. Then learn. I'll help. Why? What's in this for you? Mara smiled sadly. Nothing. That's the point. There doesn't have to be a transaction. Sometimes people just show up because it's the right thing to do. He wanted to believe her. Every fiber of his being wanted to trust that someone could care without calculation. But 15 years of evidence screamed otherwise. I need air, he said abruptly, moving past her toward the door. Elias, just give me a minute, please. He didn't wait for her response, just pushed through the house and out into the freezing night. The cold hit like a physical force, stealing breath, but he welcomed it. Pain he could understand, discomfort he could manage. But this feeling Mara stirred up, this dangerous hope mixed with terror, that was foreign territory. The stable called to him, familiar and safe. Inside, horses shifted in their stalls, recognizing his footsteps. He moved to the stallion's enclosure, the one Mara had gentled earlier. The horse watched him approach, ears forward but wary. Yeah, I know, Elias said quietly. She got to you too. The stallion snorted. She's right, about the fear, about hiding. He leaned against the stall door, exhaustion hitting all at once. But what if she's wrong about everything else? What if letting people in just gives them ammunition? What if trust is just another word for foolish? The horse had no answers. Elias hadn't expected any. Footsteps behind him. He didn't turn, knowing who it was. I'm sorry, Mara said from the doorway. I pushed too hard. You pushed exactly hard enough. That's what makes it worse. She moved to stand beside him, both of them watching the stallion in comfortable silence. Can I tell you something? She asked after a while. Can I stop you? Probably not. She smiled slightly. When Sarah first tried to be my friend, I told her to leave me alone. Every single day for 2 months. I was mean, deliberately cruel, said things designed to hurt her so she'd stop trying. What changed? She asked me why I was so angry. Not judgmental, not offended, just curious. Like my anger was a puzzle she wanted to understand. Mara paused. And I realized nobody had ever asked me that before. They judged it, feared it, tried to fix it, but she just wanted to understand it. What did you tell her? The truth. That I was angry because being angry felt safer than being sad. Because if I let myself feel how much I'd lost, how much had been taken from me, I'd drown in it. She looked at him. Sound familiar? Elias's jaw tightened. Maybe. She told me something I've never forgotten. She said, anger is just grief with teeth, and eventually you run out of things to bite. Despite everything, Elias huffed a laugh. Your friend was wise. She was, and she was right. I did run out of things to bite, and when I did, all that was left was the sadness I'd been avoiding, the loneliness, the fear. Mara turned to face him fully, but she was there when I hit bottom, caught me, reminded me that falling apart doesn't mean staying apart. And you think I need to fall apart? I think you need to stop holding yourself together with force of will and let someone help carry the weight. She touched his arm lightly. Not forever, not even for long. Just long enough to remember you don't have to do it alone. Elias looked down at her hand on his arm, that small point of contact that somehow felt like an anchor and a threat simultaneously. I don't know how, he admitted quietly. Start small. Tomorrow, when you wake up and your first instinct is to push everyone away, do something different. Anything different. Like what? Like having breakfast with someone instead of in your study. Like asking Thomas about his family instead of just giving orders. Like sitting with uncomfortable feelings instead of drinking them away. She squeezed his arm gently. Small things. They add up. The stallion moved closer to the stall door, drawn by their quiet conversation. Mara reached through the bars to stroke his neck, and the horse allowed it without hesitation. How do you do that? Elias asked. Do what? Make it look easy. The trust, the connection. You've been hurt worse than me, but you don't... He struggled for words. You don't hide. I hide differently, less obviously. Mara kept her attention on the horse. I don't let people see me cry. I don't talk about the worst parts of what happened in Denver. I keep moving, keep helping others, because sitting still means facing things I'm not ready to face. So you're not as together as you pretend. Nobody is. She looked at him over her shoulder. The difference is I know it. I don't confuse my coping mechanisms with strength. They stood in the stable for another few minutes, not talking, just existing in the same space without agenda or calculation. Eventually, Mara headed back to the house, leaving Elias alone with the horses and his thoughts. He should go to bed, should sleep off the wine and the conversation, and wake up tomorrow ready to resume his carefully constructed defenses. But instead, he found himself sitting on a hay bale, staring at nothing, turning over everything Mara had said. Trauma running his life. A scared 19-year-old making decisions for a 34-year-old man. Anger as grief with teeth. The observations cut because they were true. He'd known it on some level, but had never let himself acknowledge it. Acknowledging meant changing, and changing meant risk. But staying the same meant dying alone in this mansion, surrounded by empty rooms and wasted opportunities. Thomas found him an hour later, still sitting in the hay. You look like hell, the foreman observed. Feel worse. That woman really got under your skin. She's trying to save me. Good. About time someone did. Thomas settled onto another bale with a grunt. You gonna let her? I don't know. Elias rubbed his face tiredly. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks she's as dangerous as everyone else. The dangerous part is that she's not like everyone else. She doesn't want anything from you except for you to stop being miserable. How do you know she doesn't want something? Thomas gave him a long look. Boss, I've worked for you 12 years. I've seen at least 100 people come through here wanting something. Money, status, land, connections. They all have a smell to them. Desperation mixed with calculation. And Mara? She smells like someone who's tired of watching people suffer when they don't have to. The old man stood, knees cracking. Question is whether you're brave enough to accept help from someone who's offering it freely. After Thomas left, Elias sat alone with that question. Brave enough. When had bravery become about accepting instead of rejecting? About opening instead of closing? About trust instead of control? He thought about his father, who'd loved so fully he'd died looking at his wife instead of the road. About his mother, who'd believed beauty and connection mattered more than safety. About Elizabeth, who'd taught him that love could be performed without being real. About Victoria, who'd thanked him for giving her permission to want something different. About Mara, who'd ridden 3 days through snow to tell a stranger he was allowed to be human. The pieces didn't fit together in any way that made logical sense. But Elias was starting to realize that maybe logic wasn't the right tool for this particular problem. He stood, brushed hay from his clothes, and walked back to the house. The lights were mostly out now, just a few lamps burning in the hallway. Marie had long since gone to bed. The mansion settled into its nighttime quiet, familiar and lonely. At the top of the stairs, Elias paused outside the blue room where Mara was staying. Light showed under the door. He raised his hand to knock, then stopped, uncertain what he'd even say. The door opened before he could decide. Mara stood there in her nightclothes, practical cotton, nothing fancy, looking unsurprised to find him there. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. I wanted to... He stopped, started again. Thank you, for earlier, for pushing. I didn't like it, but I think I needed it. You're welcome. They stood in the doorway, the space between them charged with something Elias couldn't name. Not attraction, exactly. More like recognition. Two people who'd survived different hells finding themselves in the same halfway place between past and future. Can I ask you something? He said. Always. Does it get easier, learning to trust again?
Mara considered the question carefully. No, but it gets less terrifying. The first time you let someone in and they don't destroy you, it creates a crack in the certainty that everyone will. The second time, the crack gets bigger. Eventually, the fear becomes background noise instead of the whole song. Eventually. It's not quick, but it's possible. She leaned against the doorframe. You don't have to become someone different, Elias. You just have to remember who you were before fear took over. I barely remember that person. Then we'll find him together. The word together hung in the air between them, full of implications and possibilities that made Elias's chest tight. He should say goodnight, should retreat to his own room, should maintain boundaries and distance and all the things that had kept him safe. Instead, he said, Will you have breakfast with me tomorrow? Not in the dining room, somewhere normal. Mara's smile reached her eyes. I'd like that. Good. Okay. That's good. He backed away, suddenly awkward. Good night, then. Good night, Elias. He made it halfway to his room before he realized he was smiling. Actually smiling, for no reason except that someone had said they'd have breakfast with him, and he believed they meant it without calculation. Small things adding up, just like she'd said. In his bedroom, Elias didn't reach for the whiskey bottle, didn't replay the day's humiliations or catalog his mistakes. Instead, he lay in bed thinking about tomorrow's breakfast, about the stallion that had let Mara touch him, about Victoria heading to Paris with genuine gratitude instead of performed obligation, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, Mara was right about all of it. Sleep came easier than it had in years. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through ice-covered windows. Elias woke disoriented, his first thought being that he'd slept through the night without nightmares. The second thought was breakfast with Mara, which sent an unfamiliar flutter through his chest that he refused to examine too closely. He found her already in the kitchen, sitting at the work table with Marie, both women laughing over something the housekeeper had said. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that Elias almost backed out of the room. Don't just stand there, Marie called without looking up. Come eat. I was thinking we could eat in the... He stopped, catching himself. In the study, alone. The old pattern. Actually, here's fine. Mara's eyes met his, a flicker of approval there and gone. She'd changed into another simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. Nothing fancy, nothing performed. Just a woman having coffee in a kitchen. Marie set a plate in front of him. Eggs, bacon, toast. Real food. Not the elaborate production she usually prepared. Elias couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten breakfast in the kitchen like regular people did. Sleep well? Mara asked. Better than expected. Guilt finally wore you out? Marie interjected, setting her own coffee down with emphasis. About time. Man can't run on whiskey and stubbornness forever. Marie, don't Marie me. I've been watching you kill yourself slowly for years. If this young woman can talk some sense into you, I'm all for it. The housekeeper stood, gathering dishes. I'll leave you two to your breakfast. Try not to argue before you finished eating. When she'd gone, Elias looked at Mara. She's protective. She cares about you. That bothers you. It doesn't bother me. You flinched when she said she's been watching you for years. Like the idea of someone paying attention makes you uncomfortable. Mara took a bite of toast. Why is that? Because attention usually comes with expectations. Or it just comes because people notice when someone they care about is suffering. She studied him over her coffee. Not everything is a transaction, Elias. He wanted to argue but couldn't find solid ground. Instead, he focused on his food, which was excellent despite its simplicity, or maybe because of it. What's the plan for today? Mara asked after they'd eaten in silence for a few minutes. I have ranch work, accounts to review, a fence line that needs inspection, horses to train. Can I come with you? The question surprised him. It's not exciting, just work. I know what work looks like. I asked if I could come, not if I'd be entertained. She stood, taking her plate to the sink. Unless you'd rather I stayed here. Elias considered it. Having her along would change everything. The comfortable solitude of ranch work, the familiar rhythm of his day, the walls he kept firmly in place around anything personal. But that was the point, wasn't it? Doing something different. You'll need warmer clothes, he said. And boots if you have them. I have boots. Been wearing them since I got here. Then meet me at the stable in 20 minutes. She nodded and left, her footsteps light on the wooden floor. Elias sat alone in the kitchen, staring at his empty plate, wondering what he'd just agreed to. Marie returned, eyeing him suspiciously. "You're still here." "I'm leaving." "Good. And Elias?" She waited until he looked at her. "Don't sabotage this. Whatever this is. You deserve something good, even if you've convinced yourself otherwise." "I'm not sabotaging anything." "You sabotage everything. It's your favorite hobby." She softened slightly. "But maybe this time try something new, like not sabotaging."
He left before she could psychoanalyze him further, heading to his room to change into work clothes. In the mirror, he looked the same as always, same face, same eyes, same person. But something felt different, less armored maybe, or just tired of being armored. Mara waited at the stable right on time, dressed in practical layers and looking entirely unbothered by the cold. Thomas stood with her, the two of them talking easily. "Boss," Thomas greeted, "Miss Mara here says she knows her way around horses." "My father taught me," Mara said. "Before everything went wrong, anyway." "We're checking the north fence line," Elias told Thomas. "Should be back by afternoon. Want me to come along?" "No, we can handle it." Thomas's eyebrows rose slightly, but he just nodded. "I'll have the men work on the south pasture then. Holler if you need anything." Elias saddled 2 horses, his usual mare and a gentler gelding for Mara. But when he handed her the reins, she shook her head. "Can I try the stallion?" "Absolutely not. He's dangerous. He let me touch him yesterday, and you said he won't let anyone ride him. Maybe he just needs someone who doesn't approach him like he's a problem to solve." She moved toward the stallion stall before Elias could stop her. "Hey there, remember me?" The horse's ears flicked forward, wary but curious. "Mara, this is a bad idea." Most good things start as bad ideas. She opened the stall door slowly, talking the whole time in that same calm voice she'd used before. "I'm not going to hurt you, not going to force anything, but I'd like to try riding you if you'll let me. We can do it together, or not at all. Your choice." Elias watched, half expecting the horse to bolt or attack. Instead, the stallion stood still while Mara approached, while she ran her hands along his flanks, while she gently placed a saddle on his back. The horse trembled but didn't fight. "See?" Mara murmured, more to the horse than Elias. "Not so scary. Just different." She mounted carefully, settling into the saddle with practiced ease. The stallion shifted beneath her, testing, but when she remained calm, he settled too. "I'll be damned," Elias said quietly. "Language." But Mara was smiling. "He's not dangerous. He's just been waiting for someone to trust him instead of trying to dominate him." The parallel wasn't lost on Elias. He mounted his own horse without comment, leading them out into the frozen Montana landscape. Snow crunched under hooves, breath fogging in the morning air. The world felt immense and silent, broken only by the sound of their movement. They rode for 30 minutes before either spoke. "It's beautiful out here," Mara said. "I forget sometimes. When you're just surviving, you don't notice beauty. What made you start noticing again?" "Sarah." She'd point things out constantly. "Look at that cloud formation. Listen to that bird. Feel the sun on your face." At first I thought she was naive. Then I realized she'd just chosen to see the world as something other than a threat. "And you think I should do the same?" "I think you're so focused on protecting yourself that you've stopped experiencing anything. You're alive, but you're not living." She guided the stallion closer to Elias's mare. "When's the last time you just sat and watched the sunset, or listened to music without working? Or did anything just because it brought you joy?" Elias opened his mouth to answer and realized he couldn't. Years, maybe more than a decade. "That's what I thought," Mara said softly. They reached the fence line, where several posts had come loose in the winter weather. Elias dismounted, pulling tools from his saddlebag. This was work he usually did alone, methodical and familiar. Having Mara there felt strange. "Can I help?" she asked. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm asking if I can." He handed her a hammer. "Hold the post steady while I secure it." They worked in tandem, her hands strong and capable on the wood, while he drove nails with efficient strikes. It should have been awkward, 2 people who barely knew each other doing manual labor in the freezing cold. Instead, it felt companionable, easy. "My father and I used to do this," Mara said after they'd fixed the 3rd post, "before he lost everything. We'd ride out to check fences, fix what needed fixing. He'd talk the whole time, tell me stories about his father, about horses he'd raised, about dreams he had for expanding the ranch. What happened to those dreams? They died when his partner betrayed him. Turns out they'd put everything in joint names. When the partner claimed my father owed him money, debts that didn't exist, there was no way to prove otherwise. Courts sided with the man who had better lawyers. Her grip tightened on the post. My father stopped dreaming after that, stopped believing anything good could happen. And then he walked into a snowstorm, and then he gave up entirely. Mara's voice went flat. I was angry at him for years, furious that he'd chosen death over fighting, over me. Are you still angry? Sometimes. But mostly I'm sad that he couldn't see any other option, that the betrayal broke something in him so completely that he couldn't imagine recovering. She looked at Elias directly. Sound familiar? He set down his hammer. I'm not planning to walk into any snowstorms. No. You're just building walls so high that you might as well be in a tomb. Different method, same isolation. You're relentless, you know that? I know. Sarah used to say I had all the subtlety of a charging bull. Mara smiled slightly, but she also said sometimes people need charging bulls because they've gotten too comfortable standing still. They finished the fence work in silence, the sun climbing higher despite the cold. On the ride back, Elias found himself watching Mara more than the landscape. The easy way she sat the stallion, like they'd been partners for years instead of hours. The way she looked at the mountains without fear or calculation, just appreciation. The way she existed in the world without apology. What? She asked, catching him staring. You're different from anyone I've ever met. Different how? You say what you mean. You don't perform or manipulate or angle for advantage. It's, he struggled for the right word, unsettling. Because honesty feels foreign? Because it makes me feel like I've been speaking the wrong language my entire life. Mara reined in her horse, and Elias stopped beside her. They sat overlooking a valley. The ranch spread below them like a kingdom made of snow and wood. You want to know what I think? She asked. I suspect you'll tell me regardless. I think you learned the wrong lessons from your parents' death and Elizabeth's betrayal. You decided that love and trust were dangerous, that isolation was strength. But those aren't the only lessons available. What should I have learned? That your parents loved each other so much they created something beautiful, you. That their accident was random cruelty, not a judgment on love itself. That Elizabeth was one person, not all people. That you're allowed to grieve without letting grief define every choice you make for the rest of your life. Elias's throat tightened. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's just possible. She turned the stallion back toward the ranch. And possible is more than you've allowed yourself to believe in for years. They rode in silence until the stable came into view. Thomas was there, working with one of the younger horses. He looked up as they approached, his expression shifting to surprise when he saw Mara on the stallion. Well, I'll be, he said as they dismounted. Nobody's ever ridden that beast except you just now, miss.
He's not a beast. He's just scared. Mara stroked the horse's neck, same as everyone else. Thomas looked between her and Elias, then smiled knowingly. Right. Well, I'll take care of the horses if you two want to warm up inside. I can handle my own horse, Elias said. I know you can. I'm saying you don't have to. Thomas took the reins from both of them. Go on, Marie made soup. Inside the house smelled like vegetables and bread. Marie had indeed made soup, which steamed in a pot on the stove. Elias and Mara ate standing up in the kitchen, too cold and hungry to wait for formality. This is good, Mara said between spoonfuls. Marie's been cooking here since before I was born. My mother taught her half these recipes. Elias set down his bowl. She's more family than employee at this point. Does she know that? I pay her well. That's not what I asked. Elias sighed. Probably not. I'm not good at saying things like that. Practice then. Tell her today, before you lose the nerve. Mara finished her soup and rinsed her bowl. Small things, remember? They add up. Before he could respond, someone knocked on the front door, loud, insistent. Elias frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone, and visitors who knocked like that usually brought problems. Marie answered, her voice carrying from the foyer. Mr. Thornridge isn't receiving visitors today. He'll receive me. A man's voice, cultured and cold. Tell him Richard Morrison is here. Elias went still. Morrison, the railroad magnate from Denver, known for buying up land and crushing anyone who stood in his way. They'd had dealings before, none of them pleasant. What does he want? Mara asked quietly. Nothing good. Elias moved toward the foyer, Mara following. Morrison stood inside now, snow on his expensive coat, two men flanking him like guards.
Thornridge, Chess. Morrison smiled without warmth. Been trying to reach you for weeks. You don't answer letters anymore? I answer the ones worth reading. Charming as ever. Morrison's eyes flicked to Mara, assessing. And who's this? None of your concern. Elias positioned himself slightly between them. What do you want, Morrison? Straight to business. I like that. The man pulled off his gloves with deliberate slowness. I'm expanding my railroad holdings. Need a route through your northern property. I'm prepared to pay generously. Not interested. You haven't heard my offer. Don't need to. That land's not for sale. Morrison's smile thinned. Everything's for sale at the right price. Name yours. There is no price. The answer's no. Thornridge, be reasonable. This railroad will bring commerce, jobs, opportunity to the region. Fighting progress makes you look stubborn and foolish. Then I'll be stubborn and foolish on my own land. Elias crossed his arms. We're done here. Actually, we're not. Morrison's pleasant facade cracked slightly. I've already purchased the surrounding properties. You're the last holdout. I can go around you, but it'll cost me time and money. So I'm giving you one chance to be smart about this. Or what? Or I'll make your life difficult in ways you can't imagine. I have friends in Denver and Washington. I can bury you in lawsuits, block your supply lines, turn your name into mud. Morrison stepped closer. You're powerful here in Montana, but I'm powerful everywhere. Think carefully before you refuse. Elias felt rage building, the old familiar fury that made rejection feel like victory. He opened his mouth to tell Morrison exactly where he could shove his railroad, when Mara's hand touched his arm lightly. Mr. Morrison, she said calmly, I'm curious. How many landowners have you threatened today? Morrison turned to her, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Excuse me? Simple question. Is Mr. Thornridge the first person you've threatened with lawsuits and ruination, or are you working through a list? Her tone was conversational, almost friendly. I ask because threatening people seems exhausting. All that bluster and menace. Don't you get tired? Who are you? Morrison demanded. Nobody important, just someone who notices patterns. Mara moved slightly forward. Here's what I notice. You came here assuming Mr. Thornridge would respond to threats the same way everyone else does. With fear. Maybe some negotiation. But you miscalculated. Did I? You did, because you're not dealing with someone who's afraid of you. You're dealing with someone who spent 15 years refusing things much more appealing than a railroad route. She smiled. Your threats don't scare him. They bore him. Elias stared at her, caught between shock and admiration. Morrison's face reddened. This is none of your business, woman. You're right, it's not. But I'm making it my business because someone needs to tell you that bullying doesn't work on people who've already decided they don't care what you think. Mara's voice hardened slightly. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave, now, before Mr. Thornridge loses his patience and has you thrown off his property. And you're going to find another route for your railroad because this one isn't happening. You can't. We can. Elias found his voice, stepping beside Mara. And we are. You have 5 minutes to get off my land before I have my men escort you out less politely. Morrison looked between them, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he grabbed his gloves and headed for the door, his men following. This isn't over, he called back. Yes, it is, Mara said calmly. You just don't know it yet. When the door slammed, silence filled the foyer. Marie appeared from wherever she'd been hiding, her eyes wide. Well, the housekeeper said. That was something. Elias turned to Mara. You didn't have to do that. I know, but I wanted to. That man's a bully, and bullies count on people being too scared or polite to push back. She shrugged. I'm neither. You're... He struggled to find words. You're remarkable. I'm angry. There's a difference. But she smiled slightly, though I'll take remarkable as a compliment. Thomas burst in through the back door. Boss, Morrison's leaving.
Looked mad as a wet cat. What happened? Miss Mara happened, Marie said with satisfaction. Told him off proper. I just pointed out some facts, Mara corrected. Elias made the actual decision.
But Elias shook his head. You stood beside me. That's different from making the decision. That's... He paused, searching for the right word. That's what partners do. The word hung in the air between them. Partners. Not employer and guest, not host and visitor. Partners. Yeah, Mara said softly. I guess it is. Thomas and Marie exchanged glances, then quietly retreated, leaving them alone in the foyer. Elias became acutely aware of how close they were standing, how natural it felt to have her beside him, how empty the space would feel when she left. Thank you, he said. For what? For seeing what Morrison was doing and not letting him get away with it. For standing up when you didn't have to. He gestured helplessly. For everything, I guess. You would have handled him fine without me. Maybe, but it wouldn't have felt the same. Elias moved toward the study, needing to process what had just happened. I've been fighting battles alone for so long I forgot what it feels like to have someone on my side. How does it feel? He considered the question carefully. Terrifying, like if I get used to it and you leave, the loneliness will be worse than before. So your solution is to not get used to it? To keep everyone at a distance, just in case? Mara followed him into the study. That's not protection, Elias. That's preemptive grief. Preemptive grief, he repeated. That's accurate. It's also exhausting. Mourning losses that haven't happened yet, relationships that haven't formed, futures that might not come to pass. She sat in the chair across from his desk. You're so busy protecting yourself from potential pain that you're guaranteeing actual pain. Elias poured himself a drink, whiskey, because some habits died hard, but didn't offer her one. She didn't drink, he'd noticed. Probably had her reasons. What if you're wrong? He asked. What if I let people in, and they destroy me? What if I'm right and you've been destroying yourself all along? He had no answer to that. He sat in his chair, the one he'd occupied for countless nights of drinking alone and cataloging his isolation. But now Mara sat across from him, real and present, and refusing to let him hide. Morrison will come back, he said, changing the subject. Men like that don't give up. Then you'll deal with it when he does. With Thomas, with your lawyers, with whoever else you trust to help. You don't have to fight every battle alone. I don't trust my lawyers. They work for whoever pays most. Then find ones you do trust, or keep fighting alone and burn out trying. Mara leaned forward. You have resources, Elias. Money, land, people who care about you. The only thing stopping you from using them is your belief that using them makes you weak. It does make me weak. Dependent. It makes you human. There's a difference. She stood, moving to the window. Independence isn't the same as isolation. You can stand on your own feet and still accept help. You can be strong and still need people. Those aren't contradictions. They feel like contradictions. Because you've been living with a false binary. Either you're completely self-sufficient or you're pathetically dependent. But most people exist in the middle, capable but connected, strong but not alone. Elias drained his glass, the burn familiar and unsatisfying. You should have been a philosopher. I should have been a lot of things. But I'm here now, trying to talk sense into a stubborn rancher who's convinced that being alone equals being safe. She turned back to face him. How's that working out for you? Terribly. Then maybe try something different. Like what? Like admitting that having me here standing beside you when Morrison showed up felt better than facing him alone. Like acknowledging that working the fence line together was easier than doing it by yourself. Like accepting that maybe, just maybe, you're allowed to want connection without it being a weakness. The truth of it settled into Elias's bones, heavy and undeniable. He stood, moving to where she waited by the window, Montana winter stretching endlessly beyond the glass. It did feel better, he admitted quietly, having you there, working together, all of it. That's a start. But I still don't know how to trust it, how to believe it's real and not just another setup for disappointment. Mara turned to face him fully, close enough that he could see the amber flecks in her dark eyes. You don't have to believe it's forever. You just have to believe it's real right now, in this moment. Tomorrow can worry about itself. And if tomorrow brings betrayal, then you'll handle it But you can't let tomorrow's fears steal today's reality. Her hand found his, warm and solid. I'm here right now. That's real. Morrison tried to intimidate you and we pushed back together. That's real. You slept well last night for the first time in years. That's real. Stop sacrificing the present to protect yourself from a future that might not even happen. Elias looked down at their joined hands, at the way her fingers laced through his without hesitation. Such a simple thing. Such a dangerous thing. I don't know how to do this, he said. Nobody does. We all just stumble through and hope we get more right than wrong. Mara squeezed his hand gently. But stumbling together is better than standing still alone. Outside, the sun was setting early as it did in winter, painting the snow in shades of gold and pink. Elias watched it, really watched it, the way Mara had described Sarah teaching her to notice beauty again. It's beautiful, he said, surprising himself. It is. I haven't looked at a sunset in years. Really looked, I mean. I know. She didn't elaborate, didn't need to. They stood together as the light faded, hands still joined, the silence between them comfortable for the first time. When darkness finally claimed the sky, Mara pulled away gently. I should let you work. You probably have things to do. Stay. The word came out before Elias could stop it. Please, I don't want to be alone right now. Mara's expression softened. Okay, I'll stay. They ended up in the study's sitting area by the fire that Thomas had lit earlier. Not talking, not doing anything in particular, just existing in the same space without agenda or expectation. And for the first time in 15 years, Elias Thornridge felt something besides the weight of his own defenses. He felt peace. Peace lasted 3 days. 3 days of breakfast in the kitchen, of working alongside Mara on the ranch, of conversations that stretched into evenings by the fire. 3 days of Elias remembering what it felt like to exist as something other than a fortress. 3 days of almost believing that maybe Mara was right about everything. Then the telegram arrived. Thomas brought it to the study where Elias was reviewing accounts, Mara reading in the chair across from him. The old foreman's expression was grim. Morrison, Thomas said, handing over the paper. His lawyers filed papers claiming you owe him for damages. Something about a verbal agreement from 5 years ago. Elias read the telegram twice, rage building with each word. This is fabricated. We never had any agreement. Doesn't matter if it's true. Matters if he can make it stick. Thomas looked worried. He's going after you legal-like. Smart move after you embarrassed him. Let him try. I'll fight it. With what proof? Your word against his? Thomas shook his head. Boss, you need to consider settling. Give him some land. Make this go away. Absolutely not. Elias crumpled the telegram. I don't negotiate with bullies. Mara had set down her book, watching the exchange quietly. Now she spoke. What exactly is he claiming? That I agreed to sell him Northern access rights 5 years ago, took his money, then reneged. All lies. Elias paced to the window. But he's smart. He chose a time frame when I was drunk most nights, when record-keeping was sloppy, when I can't prove what happened because I barely remember that year myself. Why don't you remember? The question stopped him cold. Elias turned to look at her, saw genuine curiosity there, not judgment. Because 5 years ago was the anniversary of my parents' death, 10 years since the accident. I spent most of that year trying to forget I existed. He laughed bitterly. Turns out Morrison was paying attention to my weaknesses even then. So we prove he's lying, Mara said simply. How? I don't have records. I don't have witnesses. I have nothing but my word, which means nothing in court against his money. You have more than that. She stood, moving toward him with that determined look he'd come to recognize. You have people who know you, who can testify to your character, your business practices. You have Thomas, Marie, ranch hands who've worked here for years. You have suppliers who've dealt with you honestly. That's not nothing. Character witnesses won't beat fabricated documents. Maybe not alone, but combined with the fact that Morrison has a history of these tactics? Mara turned to Thomas. He does, doesn't he? This isn't the first time he's pulled something like this. Thomas nodded slowly. There have been rumors, other landowners who suddenly remembered agreements that didn't exist, but nobody's fought him. They all settled. Because they were alone. Mara looked at Elias. You're not alone. Not anymore.
The words hit harder than they should have. Elias wanted to believe her, wanted to accept that having people on his side changed the equation. But 15 years of fighting solo made it hard to trust in collective strength. Even if we fight, it'll take months, cost a fortune, drag my name through mud regardless of the outcome. He sank into his chair, exhaustion washing over him. Maybe Thomas is right. Maybe settling is smarter. Smarter for who? Mara's voice went sharp. For you or for the next person Morrison targets? Because if you settle, you're proving his tactics work. You're giving him permission to do this to someone else who might not have your resources to fight back. That's not my responsibility, isn't it? She knelt beside his chair, forcing him to meet her eyes. You have power, Elias. Money, influence, land. You can fight this in ways other people can't. And yes, it'll be hard and expensive and miserable. But sometimes doing the right thing is hard and expensive and miserable. You're asking me to sacrifice my peace for strangers. I'm asking you to use your privilege for something besides building higher walls. Her hand found his. You've spent 15 years protecting yourself. What if you spent the next 15 protecting others? The idea was foreign, uncomfortable. Elias had built his empire on self-interest and careful distance, extending himself for others, opening himself up to the messiness of caring about people beyond his immediate circle. It went against everything he'd learned. But then he thought about Victoria Vanderbilt, heading to Paris with genuine hope because he'd chosen kindness over cruelty. About the stallion in the stable, learning to trust because Mara had seen fear instead of danger. About his own father, who'd believed that power meant nothing without purpose. I don't know if I can do this, he said quietly. You can. You just have to choose to. Mara stood, pulling him up with her. Call your lawyer, the real one, the one you actually trust. Start building your case, and let me help. How can you help? I spent 3 months in a place run by men like Morrison. I know how they think, how they operate, what tactics they use. Her expression hardened. I know how to fight dirty when fighting clean won't work. Thomas cleared his throat. I'll start reaching out to the other landowners Morrison's targeted. See if any of them will talk, provide testimony about his pattern. They won't, Elias said. They're too scared. Maybe. But maybe they're just waiting for someone brave enough to go first. The old foreman headed for the door. I'll make the rounds, see what I can find. When they were alone, Elias looked at Mara. This isn't your fight. It is now. I made it mine when I stood beside you against him. She smiled slightly. Besides, I told you I'd stay a week. We're only on day 4. Might as well make it count. Day 4, he repeated. 3 more days before she left. The thought created an ache in his chest that he didn't want to examine. What happens after the weekends? I don't know. We figure it out then. Mara moved toward the door. Right now we focus on Morrison. One problem at a time. She was right, but the question lingered. What happened when Mara left? Would he slide back into old patterns, or had these few days changed something fundamental? He didn't know. Worse, he was starting to realize he didn't want to find out. The next 2 days were chaos. Elias's lawyer, a sharp woman from Helena named Catherine Wells, arrived and began building their defense. Thomas returned with testimonies from 3 landowners Morrison had pressured, all willing to speak if it meant stopping him. Marie coordinated logistics, housing people, feeding everyone who came to help. And Mara was everywhere, organizing documents, tracking down records, talking to witnesses with a directness that got results when politeness failed. She worked alongside Elias like they'd been partners for years instead of days, anticipating needs, filling gaps, refusing to let him retreat into isolation when the pressure mounted. On the 6th night, Elias found her in the study long after everyone else had gone to bed, surrounded by papers and looking exhausted. You should sleep, he said. So should you, but here we both are. She rubbed her eyes tiredly. Catherine thinks we have a strong case. Morrison's pattern of behavior, combined with the lack of any documentation from 5 years ago, makes his claim look fabricated. But it'll still be ugly. He'll drag your name through the press, make accusations, try to paint you as an unstable drunk who can't remember his own dealings. Mara set down the papers she'd been reading. Are you ready for that? No, but I don't think I have a choice anymore. You always have a choice. You could still settle. Give him what he wants. Make it go away.
Elias sat in the chair across from her, the same configuration they'd fallen into naturally over the past week. Is that what you think I should do? I think you should do what lets you sleep at night, and I don't think settling will do that. She leaned back, studying him. You've changed this week. Slowly, messily, but you've changed. Fighting Morrison, really fighting him, not just protecting yourself. That's part of the change. Settling would be regression. You're very certain about what's right for me. I'm certain about what I've seen. A man who's been hiding for 15 years finally sticking his head out and remembering he's allowed to care about things beyond his own survival. Mara's expression softened. Don't retreat now. Not when you're finally moving forward. Elias wanted to argue, to point out all the ways this was different from personal growth, how fighting a lawsuit wasn't the same as emotional vulnerability. But he couldn't quite make the argument work because somewhere deep down, he knew she was right. Choosing to fight Morrison wasn't just about the land. It was about refusing to let fear dictate every decision. Tomorrow's your last day, he said, changing the subject. I know. Are you leaving? Mara was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I told you a week. I kept my promise, but... But nothing feels finished. You're in the middle of this fight with Morrison. The ranch needs work. Thomas could use help organizing witnesses. She paused. And I'm not ready to leave yet. Hope flared in Elias's chest, dangerous and bright. You could stay longer. I could, but that changes things. How? Because a week was a gift, an intervention, something outside normal life. Mara met his eyes directly. Staying longer means deciding if this is normal life, if we're actually choosing each other instead of just getting through a temporary arrangement. The vulnerability in her words matched what he was feeling. Elias stood, moving to the window because looking at her made it too hard to think clearly. What if I want you to stay? The admission came out rough. Not as a guest or a helper or someone passing through, just stay. As what? I don't know. Partner, maybe. Friend. Someone who sits across from me and calls me on my garbage and makes me want to be less of a coward. He turned back to her. Someone who matters. Mara's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. And what would I do here? I'm not some society wife who knows how to host parties and wear the right dresses. I don't want a society wife. I want... He struggled for the right words. I want someone real. Someone who'll work the fence line with me and stand up to bullies and gentle, frightened horses. Someone who sees all my worst parts and doesn't run away. That's a lot of want for someone who spent 15 years refusing to want anything. I know, it terrifies me. Good. She stood, crossing to where he waited by the window. Because it terrifies me too. Staying means risking that this is real. That you won't wake up one day and decide I'm just another person trying to take something from you. That I won't realize I've traded one kind of survival for another. I can't promise I won't mess this up, Elias said honestly. I'm going to have bad days, days where I retreat behind walls and push you away and forget everything I've learned this week. I'm going to be difficult and stubborn and probably make you want to hit me. I know, I'm not perfect either. I'm bossy and relentless, and I say things that hurt even when I mean them kindly. I don't know how to be soft or delicate or any of the things women are supposed to be. Mara stepped closer. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be honest. Honest. Elias reached for her hand, that simple gesture that had become familiar over the past week. I can try honest. Then honestly, do you want this? Not the idea of not being alone, but actually this. Me, staying, building something together that might fail or might be everything we need. He thought about his father, who'd loved so completely he died looking at beauty instead of danger. About his mother, who'd believed connection mattered more than safety. About Elizabeth, who taught him the wrong lesson because he'd been too hurt to see any other option. About Victoria, heading to Paris because someone had given her permission to want something different. About the stallion, learning to trust because someone had seen his fear as valid rather than villainous. Yes, Elias said. I want this. I want you to stay. I want to figure out what it means to build something with someone instead of alone. I want to be terrified and do it anyway. Mara's smile was real, reaching her eyes in a way that made his chest tight. Okay then, I'll stay. Just like that? Just like that. We'll figure out the details later. Right now, let's just agree that we're choosing each other and tomorrow can worry about itself. She'd said something similar days ago about not sacrificing present reality to protect against potential future pain. It had sounded naive then. Now it sounded like wisdom. Elias pulled her close, not quite an embrace, but near enough that he could feel her warmth, her solid presence. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For showing up, for staying, for seeing me as human instead of as a fortress that needed conquering."
"You're welcome. But Elias?" She pulled back slightly to look at him. "I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you could." The distinction mattered more than he could articulate. She was right. She hadn't fixed him or rescued him or turned him into someone different. She'd just stood beside him while he remembered how to be the person he'd been before fear took over. They stood together in the study as night deepened outside, not talking, just being. And for the first time in 15 years, Elias didn't feel the need to fill silence with whiskey or work or any other distraction. The quiet was enough. Morrison's case fell apart 3 weeks later. Catherine presented overwhelming evidence of his pattern of fabricated claims, combined with testimonies from landowners he'd pressured and complete lack of documentation supporting his accusations. The judge dismissed the case with prejudice, warning Morrison against filing frivolous lawsuits. Elias sat in the courtroom watching it happen, Mara beside him, and felt something shift permanently. He'd fought. Not alone, not through pure force of will and money, but with help from people who'd chosen to stand beside him. Thomas, Catherine, the other landowners, Marie, and Mara. All of them contributing pieces until the whole became stronger than the sum of its parts. "How do you feel?" Mara asked as they left the courthouse. "Like I can breathe again. Like maybe power isn't just about protecting yourself, but about using what you have for something that matters." He looked at her. "Like I've been doing everything wrong for a very long time." "Not wrong, just scared. There's a difference." They rode back to the ranch in companionable silence, the Montana landscape rolling past like a promise instead of a prison. Elias had spent 15 years looking at this land and seeing only responsibility and isolation. Now he saw possibility. At the ranch, Thomas met them with news. The stallion, Mara got him fully trained, responding to commands, letting anyone ride him who approaches right. It's remarkable. "She's good at seeing past fear to the real problem," Elias said, and meant it about more than horses. That night, they gathered in the kitchen for dinner. Elias, Mara, Thomas, Marie, and several ranch hands who'd become more than just employees over the past weeks. The table was crowded, loud with conversation and laughter. Nothing like the formal, empty dinners Elias had endured for years. "This is nice," he said to no one in particular. Marie beamed. "This is what a home sounds like, Mr. Thornridge. Been waiting years to hear it again." After dinner, Elias found himself alone with Mara on the front porch, watching stars emerge in the clear winter sky. The cold was sharp but bearable when shared. "I've been thinking," Mara said, "about what comes next. And I think we should make this official. Not marriage. We're not ready for that, and maybe never will be. But a real partnership. You handle the ranch operations, I'll work with the horses and help manage anything that needs managing. We split decisions, share responsibilities, build something together. You want to be a ranch partner? I want to be your partner. The ranch is just where we're doing it." She looked at him. "Unless you'd rather keep things undefined." "No. I want definition. I want commitment. I want to know you're not leaving when things get hard." Elias took her hand. "I want to know this is real." "It's real, messy and imperfect and sometimes frustrating, but real." Mara squeezed his hand. "We're going to fight. We're going to disagree about how to run things. I'm going to push you when you want to retreat, and you're going to resist when I push too hard. But we'll figure it out." "How can you be so certain?" "Because we already have been figuring it out, every day for the past month. The only difference now is we're naming it instead of pretending it's temporary." She was right. They had been building something, slowly and clumsily, without either fully acknowledging what was happening. Naming it felt dangerous and necessary in equal measure. "Okay," Elias said. "Partners. Equal say in everything, shared decisions, honest communication even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable." Mara smiled. "Those are usually the conversations that matter most." They shook on it formally,
then laughed at the absurdity of treating a life commitment like a business deal. But maybe that was fitting. Maybe the best partnerships were the ones that recognized the practical alongside the emotional, that built foundations on mutual respect rather than just feelings. Spring came eventually, thawing the frozen Montana landscape into something green and alive. Elias and Mara worked the ranch together, their partnership settling into comfortable rhythm. They fought sometimes, sharp, honest arguments about money or methods or the 100 small decisions that came with shared life. But they fought fair, without cruelty, and always came back to the same table afterward. Thomas retired that summer, passing his role to Mara with his blessing. She took to it naturally, managing the hands with the same direct honesty she brought to everything else. The ranch thrived under their combined attention. Elias's business sense matched with Mara's practical wisdom, creating something neither could have built alone. Victoria Vanderbilt sent a letter from Paris, describing her studies and thanking Elias again for the chance at a different life. He wrote back, surprising himself with the ease of it. Staying in touch with people, maintaining connections, it still felt foreign but less frightening than before. On an evening in late autumn, a year after Mara first arrived, they sat together on the porch watching another sunset. This time Elias didn't need reminding to notice the beauty. He'd learned to see it on his own, the way Mara had always said he could. "You know what I realized?" he said. "What?" "I spent 15 years trying to protect myself from pain, built walls, rejected everyone, convinced myself that isolation equaled strength." He turned to look at her. "But the loneliest year of my life wasn't when I was actually alone. It was the year before you showed up, when I was surrounded by people and couldn't connect with any of them because I wouldn't let myself. And now? Now I'm learning that vulnerability isn't weakness, that letting people matter doesn't make me powerless, that the strongest thing I ever did was admit I was scared and ask for help." He paused. "That's what you taught me. Not with lectures or force, but just by showing up and refusing to let me hide." Mara was quiet for a moment. "You taught me things too." "Like what?" "Like it's okay to stay. To put down roots instead of always moving on to the next person who needs help. I've spent years since Sarah died being the person who shows up, fixes things, then leaves, never staying long enough to need anyone myself." She leaned against his shoulder. "You made me realize I was hiding too, just differently than you." "So we saved each other?" "No. We reminded each other that we were worth saving. There's a difference." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness claimed the sky. Inside the house, lights glowed warm. Marie was cooking something that smelled amazing. Thomas, who'd retired in title only, was in the stable, fussing over horses he claimed he didn't care about anymore. Ranch hands laughed in the bunkhouse, their voices carrying across the yard. The fortress Elias had built still stood, but now it had doors, windows, places where people could enter and exit freely, where connection flowed instead of being blocked, where walls protected without imprisoning. "Do you regret it?" Mara asked. "Any of it?" "Regret what?" "Letting me in, fighting Morrison, changing everything about how you lived." Elias considered the question seriously. His life was messier now, more complicated. He couldn't control everything, couldn't predict outcomes, couldn't guarantee he wouldn't get hurt. But he also wasn't alone, wasn't isolated, wasn't slowly dying in an empty mansion while pretending it was strength. "No," he said finally. "I don't regret any of it. It's harder this way, more vulnerable, but it's also more alive. Good, because I don't regret it either." Mara stood, offering her hand. "Come on. Marie will kill us if we're late for dinner again." He took her hand and let her pull him up, this gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Together they walked into the warm house, into the noise and mess and beautiful chaos of a life shared with people who mattered. Elias Thornridge had spent 15 years refusing the world, building higher walls, rejecting deeper connections, convincing himself that power meant never needing anyone. He'd been wrong about all of it. Real power wasn't in rejection. It was in choosing connection even when it scared you. Real strength wasn't in isolation. It was in admitting you needed help and accepting it when offered. Real safety wasn't in walls. It was in trust, built one honest conversation at a time. He'd learned those lessons the hard way, dragged kicking and screaming into vulnerability by a woman who'd refused to let him hide. But he'd learned them, and that made all the difference. The ranch that had felt like a prison became a home. The empire built on fear became something worth protecting, not for himself alone, but for everyone it supported. The man who'd rejected 43 women found partnership with someone who wanted nothing from him except honesty. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no happily ever after, just the daily work of choosing each other and building something real. Some days were hard. Some days Elias wanted to retreat behind familiar defenses. Some days Mara pushed too hard or he resisted too stubbornly, and they had to navigate the messy middle ground between two strong wills. But they did navigate it, together. Because that's what partnership meant. Not perfection, but persistent effort towards something better than either could create alone. Years later, when people asked how Elias Thornridge went from the man who refused the world to someone who opened his home and heart to connection, he'd tell them the truth. He'd been drowning and didn't know it. He'd been so far underwater that he'd forgotten what breathing felt like. And someone had shown up, not to save him, but to remind him he could save himself. The rest was just choosing, every day, to keep his head above water, to reach for hands extended instead of slapping them away, to believe that maybe, just maybe, the risk of caring was worth taking. And it was. Every single time, it was.